Please welcome back KT McFarland.
You've heard some very compelling stories today of how socialism destroys the economy, it destroys your national security, and it destroys humanity. But what they don't tell you is what it's like to experience it. Because it's not just socialism. It's not just an economic thing. It's a big government thing. It's an oppressive national state which takes away your freedoms and makes decisions for you, often at your expense. So I'd like to share with you what happened to me and what's happened to me in the last couple of years and why I am in this fight to the last breath of my existence. I joined the Trump administration as President Trump's Deputy National Security Advisor. And I was very excited to take the promises that he made on the campaign trail and turn them into policy. Promises about the Middle East, promises about Iran, promises about China. And he did brilliantly. And I was so thrilled to be part of his effort, because to me that was a revolution. But then I left the Trump administration in the middle of the first year. And I went back to my home in Long Island with my husband and thought that my life, that part of my life, my Washington life, was over. I'd retired, was maybe going to be an ambassador, but mostly I was kind of finished with that. And then I got a phone call from 2 FBI agents who said, "We're right outside your house. Can you let us in?" And so I foolishly opened my door. My husband had just left. They waited until I came back from my exercise class and my husband had left. I was alone. They came to my door and said, "We just have a few questions to ask you about we're from the Mueller investigation. We want to find out what happened and with Russian collusion." And I said, "Well, I want to find out too. I'm a national security expert. I want to find out what they were doing and how they did it and how we prevent them from doing it again." And so I asked them, "Do I need a lawyer? I haven't even met with any Russians. I'm not guilty of anything." And they said, "Well, we can't tell you not to hire a lawyer. We can't forbid you to get a lawyer, but we really just want to ask you a couple of questions to help set the stage for us, to give us some context. You're what we call a fact witness." So I talked to him for about 8 hours. And then, in my sweaty gym clothes, and FBI agents in their white shirts and stiffly erect. And then they left. And I said, "Well, what happens next?" And they said, "Well, you've been really terrific and generous with your time. That's been good for us, and it's probably been good for you, too." The light bulb should have gone off, and it didn't. They said, "You probably won't hear from us again." But, of course, they did. They called a month later and said, "We want to talk to you again. And we have some documents we want to show you." And I said, "Well, I don't have any documents. I'm a good Girl Scout. I turned over all my text messages, all my phone logs, all my emails to the government when I left." And they said, "Well, that's okay. We're just going to show you a few things." So one by one, they pulled out part of an email. And they said, "This is something that you received 1.5 years ago. What did that mean?" "I don't know. I can't remember." And then they said, "Well, here's our phone log. You talked to this person and then that person. What'd you talk to them about?" And I said, "Well, I honestly don't remember." And then I said, "Well, instead of let's save some time here. Why don't you give me all these emails that you're taking out one at a time and these text messages, and I can probably jiggle my memory a lot better." And they said, "Well, that's not how this works." So the next time I meet with them, it was more of the same, new documents. And when I said, "Can I get access to these things? I mean, you guys have seized them from the General Services Administration, and I can't get them." And they said, "Well, we'll give you what you need to know." Finally, I got the best and probably most expensive lawyer in the country, Bob Jiffer of Sullivan and Cromwell, head of their litigation practice. And then we went to see the Mueller investigation in Washington. I shook hands with Mr. Mueller. I met his 5 killer lawyers. We sat in a windowless room in a cement block basement in Washington. They had 5-inch deep binders, and they were going through every minute of every hour of every day during certain periods. And it became really clear that what they wanted me to do was to tell them what had gone on, but not really what had gone on. And they never were stupid enough to say it in these words, but the implication from their questions was that they wanted me to plead guilty to a crime I didn't commit. They wanted me to plead guilty for lying. So they were able to take a couple of Trump tweets, a few excerpts from text messages, a couple of things that I had said, and they said, well, you know, we think you should have remembered these things, and if you didn't remember them accurately, we think that that's perjury. We think you're lying to us. What it became very clear to me was that they expected me to either plead guilty to a crime I didn't commit so they'd have a pelt on the wall, or that I would implicate others, including potentially even the President of the United States. That I would say, to save my own skin, that I would say, President Trump gave me this order and then I gave it to General Flynn and we told the Russians thus and so. That was their narrative. When I've now beaten down hundreds of thousands of dollars later, 30, 40 hours later, and I turned to my lawyer and I said, and he said, well, they want you to come back again. We have another subpoena. And I said, what do they expect? There's nothing left to tell them. I don't know what they want. Why are they doing this? And he said, well, because they have a narrative. And their narrative is that Donald Trump, you know, colluded with the Russians, abused justice, committed crime. We'll figure, you know, and basically, we'll figure out what the crime is later, but they think that there's something wrong here. And you're not giving them what they want. So then I turned and I said, I was so beaten down and traumatized that I said, just tell me what they want me to say. Just tell me. I'll say it, just to get this nightmare done. And then my sweet, wonderful husband of 35 years, he said, you can't do that. You can't lie. You can't plead guilty to a crime you didn't commit. You can't implicate other people in crimes that they didn't commit just to save yourself. And I said, honey, we'll face... Thank you. So then I said, honey, this is going to wipe out our savings. We're going to go bankrupt. I'm going to spend the rest of my life in a courtroom. And he said, well, you just got to do the right thing. And so I did. And so I told my lawyers who told the Mueller people, if you expect her to say that she lied, she's not going to do it. The implication being you're going to charge her with a crime, and she's going to spend the rest of her life fighting to prove her innocence. They didn't have to prove me guilty. I had to prove myself innocent. When they finally realized they weren't going to get from me what they wanted and needed to make their case, they told my lawyer, well, okay, we're not going to charge her with a crime right now. I was so traumatized that my husband and I took our passports, we went to the airport, and we took an overnight flight to Glasgow, and we went to the most remote part of the Scottish Highlands. No cell phone, no Wi-Fi, no TV, and we took long walks in the rain. I was trying to make sense. What had happened to me, one of the most powerful people in the United States government, in the Trump administration? What was happening to our country? What was going on? And in the end, I wrote it down and I wrote a book, but I've stayed out of sight for 2 years and I'm back. This is my book. It went on sale today. But one of the things that I realized when I ran across an old Scottish ballad, and it goes like this. I am hurt, but I am not slain. I will lay me down and bleed a while, and then I will rise, and I'll fight again. I am back in this fight. You need to be in this fight. You do not want a government that can do to you what they did to me, what they're trying to do to President Trump and have not been able to do. So this is your time. Do not give your country over to these people. Thank you. I'll see every one of you on the barricades. Let's make this a good fight.